So what we're going to do today, I want to kind of shift our focus. I didn't want to dwell too much in one place. So I want to shift our focus to the base station that the player has. So as part of the onboarding process, a player registers as a user, goes through all that validation with the email and that. And then they'll be presented with a screen where they can associate with two things. One of them is their home train station, which will effectively become their base. And one of them is their drone club of preference. In other words, the club that they will be contributing towards in order to win the game. So the ultimate aim of the game is the first drone club to launch a rocket into space, which I think I said on the first video is the premise of how Deuteros starts. You'll start building stuff to launch into space. So I thought what we'd do is the first thing we'll do is test that a user can be associated to a train station and a club. So let's see, we can just create that as a test straight away. So let's bring up our terminal. So welcome everyone to my stream today. So this is stream number 3, or hopefully successful stream number 3. I was just tinkering with the code just before the stream, and when we ran this, if you remember when we ran this, we got this like an empty items array. So even though it was populating the database, we weren't getting anything back to the screen. And I was kind of wondering why. And I had a suspicion it was to do with how we were passing the item variable in. And basically what we do is when we're passing it around through these functions, we need to pass it by reference, not by value. And the way you do that in PHP is just to put an ampersand in front of it like that. So what happens now, if I run that command, is they do return the items. The values are held in the items array persistent through to the end of the function, and I get those items. So remember, it belongs to a resource ID and a user ID. So that's fine. I might put like an array map on there or something. In fact, let's do that now. Let's just put an array map. So we say, and then we can just map one item. So that's store items. That returns. We didn't put a return type here, so it's an array. Okay. So we know we're getting an array. So if I now say, okay, I can for each that array. That's our store items. Now, one thing we didn't do when we were actually writing the code, and it's the idea of the randomness of whether this is produced, so that the more they invest in their derex, the more likely they are to get resources every time the script runs. But we didn't implement that. We tried to, but again, I think I was doing it in the wrong place. So what we'll do is we'll try and implement that now. But we'll do it through the test. Hi, welcome to post-production me. Post-production me because I have an apology to make. The next hour or so was me grappling with trying to get the testing of a random result to work, and I couldn't get my head around it. I don't know if there's a legitimate way of doing that. So I came up with the next best thing, and I'm happy with it. But obviously, I'd like to improve it. So what I did was I abandoned in the index test for get associated users, and I created 2 new tests. So this one here, you can say tests if there's a 100% chance that they're going to get a resource built on their base. And I did that by populating the users with 100 rigs, which means it's guaranteed they're going to do it. And in the result, we get 3 of those users back. I also did a test to check the chance of 0% by setting the rigs to 0, and the test passes by asserting that no users pass, and these pass every time. So the logic for determining whether a user is returned in order to get a resource or not works at the extremes. And I've tried it in the real environment, the dev environment, not the testing one. I've run the scripts and it appears to work okay there as well. So I'm happy that it works. I did have to make a change to the get associated users. In fact, it's not even get associated users now, because I'm no longer filtering out if the rigs is null, because the default rigs are now 0, and if the rigs are 0, it's part of this equation now. So I might even change the name of this method at some refactoring point, but we'll see. But as you can see from the filter, for every user that's returned, we generate an array of 100 items with a value of false in each element. We then randomly populate one of those items with a value of true, so there's a 1 in 100 chance. So now, I won't go into too much detail here, but I had to split the test into two. If the user rig's value is greater than 1, then it returns an array, or it returns a Boolean if the array of rigs, if two random items from that array, in this case 2 if there's 2 rigs, match that one of them has a true in it. So in other words, the odds are successful. If there's no rigs in the array, then we check that here first, because if that's a 0, this will error. So if there's no rigs, not in the array, in the user, this will immediately go to false and won't carry on. So that leaves this case, if there's 1 rig, if there's 1, rather than check in array, the array random function returns an integer, which is the value in the array, not an array of integers. So I had to change the result to match that. So suffice to say, this works now. It returns the users only if there's more than a 0% chance of that user getting resources on that particular run of the script. So with regards to the rest of the video, please enjoy it. I'm going to cut out that big chunk of time of me grappling through this. There's just nothing constructive you could really get from it. But this is the resulting code, so you can see it here. And as I say, at some future time, I might refactor that. And also, not sure if I've said it already, it's no longer item service, but it's base item service. And it will become apparent later in the video why that name has changed. But for now, enjoy the rest of the video. And again, my apologies. Thanks for watching. Okay, so let's just take a step back now then. We've onboarded the user. We've created a drone trip. We've set up some resources that can be mined. And we've created the command script that will now run on a regular basis. And in our live site, we could run that every minute, that's fine. So there's a 1 in 100 minutes that they'll get the resources at the beginning. Yeah, I don't see any problem with that, with the timing. Okay, so we've done that, we've done the resources. So the drone carries the shipments. We haven't done the shipments for the drone, we've just done the actual movement of the drone from place to place. We haven't done the thing that they carry and all what that is. So what we could do, we could test the creation of a shipment, because that's going to be on a cron tab as well. So let's test the creation of a shipment. Let's do the same with that. So just to clarify, a shipment it belongs to a resource, as in it will be a shipment of carbon or copper or aluminium. It has a start destination or location, an end location, a current location, because it will be dropped off somewhere, or it can be dropped off somewhere, I should say. A drone ID, because it can be carried by a drone, and when it's not carried by a drone, it's at a location, so it's one or the other. It will be given some random points that get given to the user if they drop it off. I think that's all we know about it for now. Yeah, so let's create that test. Make test pest. Shipment store test. Okay, test the shipment can be stored. Might as well just grab the user person from here, and we'll import that test here. So given when we post to shipments with a shipment object, then we expect to get a 302. We need to define the shipment object. We can create the raw version of the shipment, not in the database. And we can send that up as the payload. But as we know now, shipment doesn't exist, and this will obviously just tell us so in the test. Class shipment not found. Okay, so we need to create that. So sail artisan make model MFS policy shipment. We can now import that into here. Once the IntelliSense jobby kicks in, there we go. And okay, let's run the test. So receive 404, yeah. So we need to create the endpoint. So we can do something similar to items. Let's just copy that. Two, but got 200. Okay, so then we need to redirect. So return to root. So after we've created a shipment, so bear in mind this is just one of those utility tests. So after we've created a shipment, we want to redirect to the shipment view. This is just one of those utility tests for the purposes of checking the cron console command later. So this is never really going to get called other than for the purpose of testing. So we need a shipment, so we can create one here. Yeah, that looks fine. Let's run the code, run the test. Okay, root shipments to show, not defined. So now we can say, okay. Again, let's copy the item one. Okay, I know I shouldn't have all this stuff here, but I mean, you know, it's going to happen, isn't it? So let's just, we can build these out as the few stages. Oh, okay, yeah, because we're not actually checking the content of it anyway. So that's fine. Let's go back to our test. Let's copy the test. So on this test, we can now say that a shipment can be stored, then returned. So we are changing this now to so we had following redirects. We now expect to get a 200. And the first thing we're going to check in the assertable inertia is that the shipment show page is the one that's returned. Now that doesn't exist, so hopefully this will throw an error. Yeah, shipment show does not exist. Let's go into our pages. Okay, so we create a directory called shipment, and then inside there we create a view component. So inside the shipment directory, we create a view component of show. We run the tests. Test pass. Right. What else can we check in this test? Well, we would like to believe that a shipment object is passed down. So let's check for that. It looks like it is. I think we tried to jump the gun a little bit there with when we copied over the root. Again, I'm not going to lose sleep over that. What else can we check on this test? We can check. Okay, can we? So we've got a choice now. We could stop developing this test now and work on other things to do with the shipment, which will force us back to this later. But I know the shipment is going to need certain things because of the definition of what the shipment is. And in previous incarnations of my code, I know it's got certain things. So what do? Do I go on to what the shipment can do? Or do I just carry on building out the shipment here? I think let's go on to what the shipment can do. If we assume that locations, this code that we're created to create a shipment, if we assume that this code, well, no, let's test this just to make sure it has a location, that the shipment has been created at the location. I think that makes sense. So a shipment, in effect, it's like an item what we've just created. It's just in a different context. Whereas an item is a resource and a user, a shipment is a resource and a drone or a location. Hang on a minute. Is there any reason why we can't merge those two into item and just have item will either belong to a user, which means it's in the user space, belong to a location, which means it's sat somewhere, belong to a drone, which means it's being moved around, or belong to the club, which means it's been delivered to the... Well, no, we haven't decided that. That's a thing, have we? That was from one of my previous incarnations. Is that a good idea data-wise? That it can belong to one of 3 foreign keys. Okay, so this is where I like to think things out. It's not great for TV, is it? Well, let's think. If we create an item, at the user's base, we've done that. That's part of the command. If we also can create items at locations, if we create the item at a location, we could refer to it as a different kind of item, like in the Cruddy mentality, couldn't we? So if we say an item, if it's created with a user, that's fine, it's just an item. If it's out in the wild, if it's sat at a location, it's a static item. And if it's on a drone, it's an active item. If it gets pushed in or out, if it gets pushed into or is created into a user's base, it's just an item. That way we don't need to have the shipment table. So okay, in my previous incarnations we had shipment, which was associated to a resource, associated to a from location, associated to a to location, associated to a location, because it could be at neither of those previous ones, associated to a user, and associated to a drone. That's a whole lot more relationship to add on to the single item. But then if you look at it the other way around, the shipment is going to have all of that anyway. So if we were to look at it from the point of view of the shipment has a resource, a from, a to, a current, a drone, a user. And what we're saying is we're just going to add to the shipment we're currently saying an item that belongs to a user is at the user's base. But at a shipment, if it belongs to a user, it just means that it can't be picked up by someone else, but doesn't belong to the base. So that would be a problem. If we went down the Cruddy pseudo model mentality here, we could say, okay, a static item that belongs to a user, if it doesn't belong to a location, it's an item. If it has a location or a drone, it's a static item or an active item. So it wouldn't qualify as an item. So even though it belonged to a resource and a user, if it belonged to a location, it would be a static item. So we'd have to change the item query on the store items, the one we've just spent ages on. But it would mean that it is just the one kind of model that's getting passed around, and that carries a lot of weight. I think we should do that. So let me just see what my previous Git files have been created. I might just undo this. Alright, yeah, no, we're back to where we were. So I know this has taken a lot of time. I know this is kind of like not coding, but this is kind of why I wanted to do this, because these are the thought processes that I'm going through trying to make this work. I mean, we could have got it to work with shipments, you know, it's one of them. It could have worked, but I think I'm just kind of trying to generalize here. It makes sense that the thing being passed around can be passed around into a user's base as well. I didn't see the point of having it as a separate item. So what we're going to do now is the item store. We kind of need to change that now to, I want to change the name of that refactor. If we call it base item, and we know what we mean then. Okay, so base item, let's look at that store test. Test our, well, it'll be it'll be our base store test. Due to the unique way the English language is created, a base item can be stored. Do we want a factory for base item? Do we actually want to create the model and everything? Or can we just create it to mock up as a base item? We can, a base item will always belong to a user. So we could make that up in the factory, couldn't we? Let's do that. Oh, I don't want to make it complicated. Might as well let the factories do the work for us. So Sail Artisan make model, we're not including the migration because it is going to share the same data table as the item. But we do want the factory and the CDAO. We want the policy, and we're calling it base item. So what we can do with that is go into the factory, and we know that a base item is always going to belong to a user. We know that. It can't not belong to a user because that's partly what defines it as a base item. It's not the only thing, obviously. But what it means is that we know we can put this user factory. That just has to be there. We can always override it, but we can't override it with an empty. So then we can say, okay, base item factory raw. If we now go to post a base items, and we might as well just play along with that with the name in here. Base item, post base items, response state 302. We can do the same here. So that's going to be base item. Item factory raw, following redirects base items, base item, component base item show has, now at this point we were in the front end, so item is fine, I'm not bothered about that. So everything else checks out. So we're going to get a few errors now. Yeah, the 404 was the obvious one, but we need to go to the root and look for the items. Get items post, there we go. So we're going to call that base items. Item service request, item service store, base items request, item service store, item resource. File get resource, I say user find auth, that's fine. Return to root base items show item. This is just for the test, so I'm going to leave it as, yeah, I'll leave it as items show, because that's not really going to make a change to anything. Let's run the test. So base item show instead of item show, okay. So because of that, that was because I was getting a bit ambitious here. Let's just go to item show. Store item, argument must be of type resource, null given. Oh, because the factory would have done that. So let's go to the item factory. Yeah, so we just need to copy that. Let's just copy that into the base item factory. resource. All right, cool. So let's just check the live site works. Yeah, okay. Didn't get anything, but it didn't error. I think what we'll do, just to double check that. Okay, if we just put that to 100 and run the test again. Yeah, so we get our items, that's fine. All right, so that's fine. So we are going to change this command. Let's call it store base item. I don't know what the protocol is for 2 words. Oh, it's a hyphen. Item service store. I want to call this base items, and then if we go into the item service store base items, and in fact the item service I need to rename that, so because this was all to do with the base item, so refactor, rename base item service, get rid of that. We're not using the builder. Okay, base item service, and yeah, we're doing that there. Where else are we doing that from? The command base item service. It's the tests, isn't it, which is in the web. Base items, base item service. Yeah, I know that doesn't really make that much difference, but I just kind of like that. In fact, we'll do that here as well. Okay, so we've just renamed item to base item and changed everything related to that. Let's just check our tests still pass. And let's check the manual stuff still passes. Yeah, okay, seems to be all right. I'll just do my check here. Oh, why have we done that? Rigs equals 100. Ah, there we go. Okay, and we just need to. I just need to double check the other bits on the items. So to get an item, we're actually now saying it's. Oh, let's do it through the test. We are going to item show. Yeah, it's okay because it doesn't matter what it is. So that's the items bit done. We can now. So now let's think about the item in what I was going to call a shipment. So we're going to create static items now, which are items at locations. We don't query the items anywhere, do we, at the minute? We need to be careful of that. I want to kind of inject that into the model as like a scope. Let's create a test. So sale artisan make test pest static item store. So same as the base item store, but created slightly different. So we might as well go to the base item store. Let's just copy that first test to get going. A static item can be stored. We need a user. So static item doesn't exist at the minute, but we can create it there and do a 302. So we need to create static item. So sale artisan make model dash fs dash dash policy static item. All right. So we can import that in here, and we should be able to run that. 302, but got 404, that's fine. We can now go to the web. So again, this is one of those test methods just to help with the cron job later. So which one? Base items, we can copy that, and we can comment that out. So let's run that test again. Expecting 302 but got 200, so we need to redirect to the item show, but we need an item for that, which is going to force us to create the static item. So static item create, but let's think about what a static item needs. So it's going to be Table not found, testing static items. Yeah, okay, so what we can do is say, we should put that in the base one as well actually. I'll copy that. Okay, let's run that test. Okay, have I done the UUID on items? I have. So general error, field ID doesn't have a default value. I need to say has UUIDs. Okay, so I've put has UUIDs on both of those pseudo tables. So we've got a different error. Field resource ID doesn't have a default value. So insert into items. So this is the static items. So did we not put a... Oh no, it was in base items, wasn't it? So static items doesn't have a user ID. Not by default anyway. Resource ID doesn't have a default value. Insert into item. So static item store test. Is that because... Oh, I know why that might be. If I go into base item, protected table items, static item, yeah. It's very tempting to base item, user ID, resource ID. Okay, so let's run the test again, and we still have an error, so that hasn't quite worked. So when we're trying to create a static item, it's saying the resource ID. So just to check, static item, resource ID is fillable. All right, cool. So go down to my... Is this the static test store? So we're getting a static item factory. Let me just go to the static item factory here. Resource ID equals resource factory. So we are definitely getting a resource here. If I go to resource factory, yeah, that's populating up fine. So when we run this test, where it's saying the field resource ID doesn't have a default value when it's trying to insert. So what are we strictly trying to insert? Static items. Item equals static item create. Now in the item service, this store item, I just used item. I didn't use base item. So is it because I'm trying to do it with static item? Is this something I've missed? Has factory, has UUIDs, resource ID is fillable. If I go to item, has factory, has UUIDs, resource ID is fillable. Response, this post, static items, item equals static item create. Oh, I didn't put the request data in, did I? So it has no idea what I'm doing. Different error. So it's static items, field user ID doesn't have a default value. Okay, now we don't want a default value for static item. Ah. But it's expecting one. this is where I just need to be a bit careful now, because this could break all the tests. But no, okay. I just need to be careful. Not that it breaks other tests, but I don't get the right result. But it seems to be okay at the minute. All right, that's fine. Let's chalk that up as a win. So let's see. Static items. Let's just leave it there for now. Okay, what I just want to do, this returns. Well, that's okay. There's no casting for the items there. Yeah, I'm not going to be fussed with that. I'm just wondering whether if I put base item there rather than item, whether I get an error or not. Okay, I got 2 errors. So the return value isn't correct. So I assume that's this here. Oh, okay, the 2 errors have gone, so that's it. Yeah, that's fine. If I just go down to the command line of what calls that, it's, yeah, there's no issue there. It's just calling it item. Again, I mean, you know, I suppose just to not confuse anyone. Well, no, just so as not to confuse me, we'll just call it base item, but that's fine. So we've stored the static item now. Did we just do the first half of that test, or was it both? No, we've just done the first half. So we now need to do the second half. Again, let's just copy this one from base item. Okay, we've copied this from base item, so let's just change the name. So a static item can be stored, then shown. I'm going to say return just very quickly. I was watching a YouTube video about how you phrase things. If we're going to say shown, that kind of makes sense because we're going to return back to a page where it's visually shown. So this static item or the item show page. But what that implies is that the nature of how that data is going to be returned, i.e. visual. What if it's sent back through some kind of reader or some other medium? It you know, other than visual for those who are impaired or for just some other mechanism, maybe for another endpoint from another computer. So the idea was that if you change your terminology to be a bit more generic, so as not to preempt what you might be doing, then it just frees up your mind to not think you have to create information to show. You're just creating information to return. How that's shown, it should be irrelevant to the test or to whatever it's calling it. It's a really small thing, but I like it. It's one of those things I like because it affects you mentally as well as with your actual programming. Excuse me. So that's why I've kind of got into the habit of not determining the nature of how something's going to be returned, just the fact that it's going to be returned. So I'm going to say, or first thing I'm going to do is say static. Anyway, where the word base, I want to put static. And yeah, that also needs to be static. So in the one I copied it from, it wasn't. I might have to go back to that a bit later, but for now, that's fine. Let's insert insertable inertia. Item show is fine because they'll all end up there. So it has a resource. So remember, we're dealing with the static one, which is created at a location ready to be picked up. So it has a resource, but it does not have a user. In fact, what we can say is where user ID is null. So yeah, we kind of jumped the gun a little bit here. We wouldn't normally do more than one at a time, but what we're saying is that yeah, it does have a resource, but there's no user on this, and that's just to be sure that we haven't falsely created it. It's something we need to check, but we haven't created it in the wrong context. And that's fine. That actually passes the test first time, which is great. Okay. So we also need to check a lot more with the static test though than we do with the base. So for example, we said it belongs at a location. It has a from. It has a from location. It has a to location. It has a current location. It has a drone as well as a resource, and eventually it has a user as well. So we need to check the different contexts of this static item, which when it belongs to a drone becomes did we call it a traveling item, an active item? Static and active, traveling, mobile. We'll give it a word. We'll give it a word to describe it. So when it's just newly created, it will definitely have a resource. It will also definitely have a location ID. So we'll call that a location. So a location is where it currently is. It's not, it could be at the start location. It could be at the end location. It could be somewhere in between. It can be dropped off by a drone somewhere else for maybe another team player to pick up or just to put to one side. So we need to keep a track of the location. We'll do the from and the to in a minute. Let's just do the actual location. So we're checking where the ID of the location is equal to the location ID that's created. So let's go to this, let's run the test. Property item location does not exist, which we kind of knew. So if we go to the web, for static items, we're going to return item show. Item is, I think here I'm just going to change the name of that to static item. I don't know, I'm just helping with context here. I know it's going to the item show page, but I just want to help with context. So static item, so item equals static item, and we want to load the location. So hopefully this will fail saying that relationship doesn't exist. Yep, call to undefined relationship location. So now we can go to static location. So we've created a relationship of location, which is a belongs to the location class. Let's just add a belongs to type hint there. Okay, we can run that. Failed asserting that false is true. So property item.location does not exist. Now we know we've tried to do it in the web. We know we've created it on the model, so it must be that it actually doesn't exist, which is fine. We know that because we haven't created that relationship. So we can go into the factory. Well, we've created the relationship. We haven't actually created the content for that relationship. So we can say location factory here for the static item because we know it needs it. Let's run the test. So item.location does not exist. Yeah, we did return it as an item, didn't we? So let's have a look. Static item. Items.show. Yeah, we returned it as item, so that's fine. Again, I'm getting to the point where I think maybe I should call it static item, but oh no, we can't because the items.show will only pick up on one of those, so that has to be item. So we're loading the location, but the error is that item location does not exist. So we've loaded it in the web. We've got a relationship in the model, and we've created it in the factory. So when we go to the test, we're creating it. The static item will have a location ID, but the actual error is that it doesn't have a location. Okay, let's dump the static item. Let's just make sure we're seeing the correct information. Yeah, we've got a location ID and a resource ID. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So the problem must be in the actual command that creates it. Static item equals static item create request all. So let's dump the static item it's created and see what we've got. So we have a resource ID. We have no location ID. Okay. So if we go to static item, yeah, we didn't put a location ID. So let's run that test again with that in the fillable. Now hopefully we'll see that dumped out. Oh, we haven't seen that dumped out. Do we need to, is that what's faulted our test? Let's go back to web. Oh, well, that's a good sign because it suggests it's made a difference. So let's have a look. It might be that our oh no, it wasn't. I thought it might have been our debug that caused the problem. So unknown column location ID. If we now go into the items, yeah, so we need to create a location ID, and this has to be nullable. Let's run that test. So property item.location does not exist. So no, we've still failed stating that false is true. How strange. I thought we fixed that. Okay. Let's go back to the web. So let's debug the static item here. So we get a location ID, we get a resource ID. They're in there. Ah, yeah. What? Okay, I've done this mistake before. I've put the load on the redirect parameter, not on the actual show parameter. So I need to go to items.show. Oh, we still got a fail. Interesting. 2 fails. Call to undefined relationship location and model app models item. Okay, so let's try that again without the exception handling. I'm not quite sure where that is now. So that is call to undefined relationship location on item. So that is on roots web 40. Roots web 40. Yeah, because now we're loading the item. Okay, so the obvious solution here is to do this. All right, now that works. However, this is where we start thinking, are we repeating code? Because we've got the same function now over multiple classes. And as I said, if we did kind of extended the static class and the base class from the item, sorry, the static item and the base item from the item class, we wouldn't have this problem. There seems to be a growing trend towards composition nowadays rather than, is it inheritance? Yeah, rather than the inheritance. PHP does that great because you can use traits. So I'm thinking whether we should put the common stuff into a trait rather than duplicating it across the models. All right, let's do that. Let's just create a trait. Let's create a directory, app, traits. Now, so here's how I think it should work. Let's get rid of the terminal. If I've got an item, so the item belongs to a location, a resource, and a user. We know for a certainty it belongs to a resource. So I'm suggesting we cut that out of here, we paste that in here. I think that's just because how it's not been imported yet, but or it might just be the IntelliSense. And then in the item trait, we say use the item class, sorry, item trait. Now if I go to item trait, yeah, that's resolved itself. So now any of the other two that use resource, that does, but it'll automatically inherit it. That does, and it now will automatically inherit it. Oh, no, it won't. I have to actually import it, don't I? So use item trait, and same for the static. Use item trait. Run the tests. They're fine. Just going to run the migration test like on the live site, which doesn't seem to exist. Oh, here we go. No? Yeah, okay, that's fine. It's not errored. We can always trace that back later. Okay. So base item, static item, and the factory we don't want. So we're happy with this test that it has a location. We now need to do the same with two other things, which is the from. So has from, where ID equals from ID. Okay, let's try that. Item from does not exist. So we can go to the factory again, the static factory, and we can say, yeah, I want a from. And in fact, at the time the item's created, it will always be the same as this one here. So how can I'm not sure how to do this in line. So what I'm going to do is just say from equals location factory, and then I can say from and from. Yeah. Okay, let's see what the error is. Title property.from does not exist. That's fine. We can go to the web and we can say with the item show, we now want a from, too few arguments to function query builder from. Let's put a from relationship in here anyway, because I kind of know we need it. Belongs to location class, but we have to set it as from ID. Hopefully we get a different error. Property item.from is not scopable. That's fine. We can now go to the items table, create a from here. Use ID from, nullable constrained, and that is to locations. I think that's fine. So we can run that. Items.from is not scopable. We did do the factory, didn't we? From ID is from. So we have a from ID, which is constrained to locations. Column is ID. Yeah, that's fine. It belongs to location, but using the from ID keyword. Just double check that's the right place to put that. Related foreign key, yeah, that's fine. Let's close that. So we're loading from, but the test is saying property item from is not scopable. So static item needs a from ID. Yeah, there we go. All right, sweet. And then if we will do the same for 2, run that test. Item 2 does not exist. So we can go to the web. We can say from location 2. And we need to go to the static item. Oh no, we need to go to the item from location, and then let's copy that one. And we'll call this 2. ID, and I'm just going to load up the items table before I run the test. I know it has to be done from location 2. There's no point pretending that it isn't going to happen, so I might as well just do it. Now let's run the test. The resource factory, I think, might be the one more issue here. Oh, press the wrong key. So we go to the, not really fuss for the policies. If we go to the static item, from ID, location ID, so to ID, we can just pull in another location. Because it shouldn't be the from ID. Okay. Item.2 is not scopable. I always miss something on this, don't I? Let's go to static item, from ID, to ID. Yeah. There we go. Has from, location to, resource. We'll stick it above the resource. Has drone. I am just going to fill in a lot of these now, because I think you get the idea. And then to ID, resource ID, drone ID. Okay, so no doubt I'll have missed something, but let's run the test. Property item drone does not exist. Item show. Oh yeah, I didn't put it here. Item drone is not scopable. So we put drone in the show. Is it the factory? It is the factory. Ah, no. For a static item, no, there is no drone. There is no drone for a static item, so I need to take that off the test. Did I add it to the database table? I think I did, but I mean, yeah, we will need a drone at some point, but for now, it's static. It's not in a static. So let's just run that. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I'm sure there's things we've missed and we'll come back to when we develop this a bit deeper. But that's fine. And we kind of made a pretty good decision there with regards to the item, I think. The more I'm thinking about it, it's adding a bit of um, like a bit more logic and a bit more thought we have to put in when we're addressing items. But I think we've kind of done that to this point, so I'm quite happy with that. All right, sweet. So that's it for today. Thank you for following if you have been. I will see you on the next stream. Bye.